Welcome to Vermonters in Business, where we highlight some of the very best business leaders in our state and the amazing things they're doing in their communities. People of Vermont, welcome to Vermonters in Business, where our mission is to highlight the businesses and business leaders in our state that are doing amazing work in their careers and their communities. I am your co-host, Drew Kinney. I am a seventh-generation Vermonter and a business owner in the state. And joining me on the show, as always, is Travis Spencer. He is our co-host. He is a serial entrepreneur, a local business enthusiast, and around here, we know him as a world-class insurance agent. Travis, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Doing great. Love
Mr.
it.
King of the hot take. What types of hot takes do you got for us today?
I got a great hot take. You know, I always like to have the hot take kind of be around the guests, and since we have a brewer here, my hot take today is just yummy phase alcohol. Why are we in this world where everything has to be yummy tasting? You know, you go into a liquor store, you see everything's candy this, candy that. It's like either you like the taste of alcohol or you don't.
I see.
So we don't need to fluff it all up with all this, yummy phase stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you want bourbon, have a bourbon, but does it have to be blackberry Crown Royal or peach?
Peanut butter.
You don't happen to have any blackberry brews coming out or anything, right?
Well, no, that's fine. That's fine in a beer, but
Fruit in beer.
well, I think it's Sycamore Brewing out of North Carolina did a gummy bear IPA.
Yeah,
I'm like,
there's been a lot of that.
I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? We don't need to do this.
Yeah.
So that's my hot take for the day. We got to get rid of the yummy beer, the yummy alcohols. Either you like it or you don't.
Right.
All right. Well, I love it. So joining us today, we got an outstanding show. Matt Bartle from Two Heroes Brewing. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get you on the show. It's been on my list for a little while of people I wanted to do it. We had a few early ones, and it's like, you want to get the kinks out, make sure we know what we're doing before you bring in somebody that.
Kudos to you guys for doing this. It seems real fun.
So Matt, you were originally from Princeton, New Jersey, huh?
Yes.
And then how did you make your way to Vermont?
Well, my grandparents bought some property in 71, I think, in South Hero.
Yeah.
And instead of going to the Jersey Shore, made my way up to the lake for some summer vacations and
Nice.
fell in love with it. And then after college, wanted to just get out of New Jersey.
All right.
And New Jersey was great, but Vermont.
Where did you go to college?
I went to college at Lafayette College, Easton, PA.
Yeah.
So just far enough over the border. To
Yeah.
pay more money, but only an hour from home.
Yeah. Now, Kristen, is she originally from here, or?
No, she's a Maniac. from
Okay.
Maine.
Nice.
And
Travis
I'm
is
from
also in Maine.
Yeah, and she went to school in Pennsylvania as well, different schools, but we kind of united after college.
Yeah.
And she took the plunge and moved up here with me.
You say sold her on Vermont, huh?
Yeah, she fell in love with it when she came too.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty easy for most people to do.
Yeah. Now, you guys, did you start out in the Islands, or were you in Burlington for a little bit? You and Kristen.
We lived at my grandparents' house that was at the time vacant.
Yeah.
Which was a really nice
Yeah.
situation because it was near the lake and we really were young.
Island living from the start. That's
we
the way
had,
to do
we
it.
had no responsibilities as 22 and 23-year-olds, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I started the bagel shop, so that was the last 15 years of my life.
Yep. And then in the process there, opened up a brewery.
Right.
And hit the ground running there. So
Yeah. And incubated the same space twice.
Yep.
which was really terrible.
Yeah.
But it was a place to start.
Yeah, it worked. We'll probably talk about it later, but one of my favorite memories is when I first moved back to Vermont and stopping at the bagel shop and getting homebrew advice from you while I waited for my bagel, to get ready, So there was always an incubator stage of this brewery thing sitting out there somewhere,
Well, ironically, when I kind of got back into homebrewing after college, my now partner Darren and I, we did brew in the back of Wally's place. In the back of the bagel shop, which was funny.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Like put it all away for the day, and then at the night you just
take it back out. Mm-hmm. But all right, so the first thing we do on every show is we jump into something we call the Vermont Hot Seat. Are you ready for the Vermont Hot Seat questions?
I don't know.
All right, we're all game on. Pancakes or waffles? What are you having with your Vermont maple syrup?
I'm going to go with waffles.
Okay.
It has to be with butter and it has to be really thick maple syrup.
Yep,
I'm
I like
tired
it.
of fancy. It's
All right.
just too fancy.
I like it.
Yeah.
And a perfect day for you, is it a winter day at the mountain or a summer day at the lake? You got to pick.
That's going to be tough because when I first started to come up here, it was the summers, and I loved that. Didn't ski until college, maybe, and now my kids are getting into skiing.
Yeah.
And I'm over 40 and I'm trying to do jumps.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this is really fun, but also could be disastrous. So, I'm going to still say A Day by the Lake would be my all-time favorite.
I think one of the things that was actually really fun to watch over this winter was your quest to tackle all the peaks in Vermont, was it?
Oh, yeah, I was hiking.
Yeah. I didn't even know you could hike half of those in the wintertime. But
earlier on in my life, I had done some White Mountains hiking in the winter with a group that always didn't want to hike in the summer because it was too easy.
Sure.
And then the VT5, they have this little challenge you can do, and they can do it for the summertime months or the wintertime. And I was like, if I do all, you get a sticker.
Oh, you got to get a sticker.
I was like, I'm going to do all 5 and get a sticker. And it was awesome.
Where'd you stick the sticker?
On the back of my truck.
All right.
But it was a weird year to do it because it wasn't really wintry.
It was,
until the end.
Yeah.
We had more spring-like hiking conditions, which was very strange.
That's cool. All right, and then it is your birthday. You can go to any restaurant in the state. Where are you going?
Oh my gosh. Well, having kids, we don't leave
fair
for dinners very often. So it's then you have to pick one when you go.
Yep.
Gosh, I'd have to say Honey Road right now is up there with, in Grey Jay, which is the associated restaurant. They're kind of intriguing and fun.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that out there. I mean, there's probably 100 different places I could pick.
Oh, yeah. No, those are good picks. I think they've come up a couple of times, too. But, I've been to Grey Jay once and Honey Road a few times.
Yeah,
and,
it's fantastic stuff.
And
fantastic food. Not just stuff.
Yeah. it's I like it at Honey Road too. I like how you order too because it's shared plates a little bit more, and that's always fun. But
community.
Yeah. So in the summertime, it is a hot summer day. What is your creamy order?
I'd say Allen Home Maple Creamy.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, it's when you've had that, and then you go have sort of your, I don't want to say generic or run-of-the-mill creamies from other places. Just the flavor that holds is so much better.
He's been in the news lately, but Howard Dean, he says that's his favorite creamy. Yeah, that's their claim to fame.
Still.
Thinking about making another run.
Oh my!
We said we weren't going to get into politics.
I know. Say that, no politics.
Everything's political.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the Vermont hot seat questions. You survived.
That was a lot easier than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking it easy.
Yeah. Maybe we'll sneak something else in there. Something.
Yeah.
But Travis, why don't we dive in? Let's talk something about Two Heroes.
We started talking about it a little bit, but how did it all start?
Like I said, I was a home brewer, and as a serial entrepreneur, I started a bagel shop many years ago without necessarily knowing everything there is about running a business and knowing how to make a bagel. And got to a point where that was sort of a successful business, and I was like, I can do this again with another sort of hobby that I have. And thankfully, it wasn't just me on my own, because we would not be here today. Yeah. My partner, Darren, I would say, if you came to me for homebrewers advice, you were here and I was here, and then Darren is there. Yeah. And so when he came he actually worked for me at the bagel shop 10, 15 years ago, and I found out he was a home brewer, and I was like, oh my God, I latched on to him. Yeah. And we've sort of just brewed together and watched the market do its thing. And finally around 2019, I think, in the complex where the bagel shop was, we had some extra space to build a brewery. Yep. And found that the market was trending such that, high intensity manufacturing of beer, in great quantities, was going to kind of fizzle out, and we're kind of seeing that now, I think. And
I think so, yeah.
And a different model, or a better model, would have been a brew pub. So we kind of settled on that, and then the rest is history. It took quite a while with COVID right in the middle there of accessing money. Yep. And then the fallout afterwards of the long build and the prices just skyrocketing and labor costs skyrocketing. So we made it through, and we had some great support from our town and some great investors that are community oriented and understand that this is a long run. It's not an instant investment.
Right.
And more importantly is the space that we've created where people can come and we can have people working and we can have people playing and people eating and drinking, and it's all there. And in the nearly year that we've been open in the new place, it's been really great.
Well, it's like you read my notes because you're leading into a lot of my questions. One of the things I want to ask about is the jump from home brewing to a larger scale brewery. My wife makes meat at home, and I see her make a little 5-gallon carboy, and then I always think it's like you start with a small scale operation, and then you got to ramp up.
Yeah.
How is that process? How do you keep the consistency? Is there a lot of wasted beer? Yeah. How did it go from the garage to the?
Yeah, I mean. Thankfully, Darren has done such a great job that we've had very little wasted beer. And so I'm a super frugal entrepreneur. We're saving the old bagels for dog treats or pigs or something. And so we haven't had a lot of loss. But the ramping up thing is just getting bigger equipment, and as you get bigger equipment, you get better systems. Right. So you're in a cleaner work environment. Like home brewing, I always had issues with not keeping everything sanitized. And a separate yeast would take over. It would be like a farmhouse ale all of a sudden.
Right.
And so we have much less of that as you ramp up. You just have bigger vessels and better procedures.
And you can scale the science probably easier going up as opposed to going down.
And the reason that I'm not brewing all the time and that Darren and our assistant brewer Travis is brewing is because they are honed in on the water quality. They're honed in on the sanitation and all that stuff that goes into it. I was more like, seat of my pants. This one came out great, but I would never be able to make it again.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And so once you get those recipes dialed in, you have a great procedure. It's really not. It is challenging, obviously, to make beer, but it's not it's not that much different than home brewing.
Now, I think on your website you call yourself a nano brewery.
Right. I think because of where we moved just in the last year with our new building, we have a 5 hectoliter system, which is 4.3 barrels.
Okay. Because I was going to ask, what is
that's now microbrew. We were just talking about this the other day, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had a barrel and a half system at our pilot system, and then moving to 4 barrels is apparently microbrew.
Okay, because I was going to ask you what the breakdown was. Okay.
I think it's somewhere in the 2 area above 2, I think, if I can remember correctly.
Okay. And you touched upon, watching the beer industry, and this is something I really wanted to dig into, was, there's been some breweries go by the wayside the last couple of years. Yep. There's been a lot that are going out of business nationwide. And then I know for years we always talked about it, is just the oversaturation. It's like, how many more breweries can open up? I'm from Maine, and it was the same thing in Maine. I mean, Maine just blew up, and Vermont blew up, and so we were just looking at this trend for the last several years. I read an article recently out of Maine about some breweries there deciding growth for them isn't trying to get more distribution on a shelf, but it's maybe opening a second tap room and doing more on-site stuff. Do you see that as the sustainable future for smaller breweries?
I'm hoping. Yeah. I mean, that's the model we went for, because there is a lot of beer out there, and you can have 40 different IPAs that, the average drinker would just drink any of them. Right. They might pick it based on the can design and something like that. Right. And I've seen over the years all these breweries start up, and then they're like, oh, we need to add food. Yeah. And so I knew, coming from a little bit of a food background, that I wanted to hit the ground with that.
Right.
And whether or not that's fun, because a lot of times staffing a restaurant and inventory and all that stuff has its challenges, but it provides the sort of full experience, because we're going for an experience in what we're doing. Yeah, 100%. Where you have a place to come drink, and we have NA stuff, so people don't have to drink alcohol. Right. They can just come for food and water. We have lots of other things, and then the kids can be there, and we're hoping that's the sustainable model. And just selling more beer over the bar, and dishing out less, because canning is expensive.
Yes,
especially if you don't do it yourself. We have a mobile canner come in, and it costs a lot of money. I mean, we love the experience, and we get our beer in cans, but then you got to do something with it. You got to store it, and then you got to get it somewhere, and then you got to sell it. So it's this whole other thing, and I get it. Cans are convenient. Right, people love 4-packs because they're just like, oh, I don't have to commit to a growler or whatever this is. But if you really want to make the brewery money, buy growlers. Right. Go and drink pints at their bar, because that's where their margins are the best. Right. That's where you're gonna have the best experience, as far as we believe. But it's the stuff that's gonna keep small breweries in business.
Yeah, fighting for that shelf space, because you go into any, Hannaford Shaw's, any beverage warehouse, it's just like...
And the bigger craft people, they have the money and the size to just pump out a ton of beer.
Right.
And in cans, no less. And it's economical for them. Whereas the smaller ones, unless we invest $5 million into a canning facility and a huge mega brewery, we might never even sell that beer. You don't know.
Yeah.
So for down the road, obviously you're still in your infancy to some extent, but if you had a crystal ball and a long-term vision, if you got to that point, would it be opening a different location somewhere else possibly to grow the business, or just kind of sticking to that model, you think, that you're in now?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I did say that if we, made a beer that was so good, we would farm it out to, have it contract brewed by someone else.
Sure.
Or like a collaboration works well for some small breweries, because if someone has bigger equipment, you brew over there and you can get the word out. But I think, I've never really liked catering, which means like going somewhere else and selling. So having one location that's your home, that you can control everything and everything. Certainly if there was the need for another brew pub 30 miles away, and people loved what we did, I would be open to that. But it didn't happen in my previous business. People talked about it a lot, but nobody wanted to do it.
Right.
So there's only so much capacity you can have, as you guys probably know.
Yeah. You talked about that journey of opening the brew pub, and how extended through COVID and all that. What was that experience like when you poured the first beer for a customer?
I was gone.
Yeah.
But when I came, I was gone for like the first weekend that we opened, because I was away with my family.
Is that a bad way to do it?
No, it was right after I sold Molly's.
Taking a break.
But it was just great to see the community that I've seen for 15 plus years in a different venue, and I'd have to say happier venue. I feel like when you have a breakfast lunch joint, you get sort of like people are not always the most excited to be there. They just need some sustenance.
Rushed.
Whereas in this environment, people are usually there to meet someone, reunite with someone, have a good time. Listen to music and stuff. So just watching people belly up to the bar and be like, oh, this is great to have this.
And a space that was needed for an area that's very community oriented.
Right.
That's incredible.
And that, we're hoping that we hit the nail on the head with that, and we got to make sure we can keep up our side of the bargain and provide the food and provide the beer. And
along those lines, as a home brewer, what was it like to see your beer in a can on a shelf at a store somewhere?
That was pretty cool. We had started in that pilot space prior, so when we got the first canning run and the labels, and I was like, oh my god, this is happening.
We're doing this.
And it's so far from cleaning 48 12-ounce bottles and using the gun to fill them all and capping them. So I think that's part of the fun for me as a serial entrepreneur. It's the journey.
Right.
And I used to say it about construction until this one. I think I need a break from construction a little bit.
It was worth like 3 construction projects. At least.
It's just a very different environment we're in with the building world.
And in regards to the beer, how did you decide going into this, what types of beer you're going to offer?
I think a lot of it was really Darren. Darren had a particular taste. He's a very educated drinker, I want to say, if that's such a thing.
I think so.
But he's more into traditional and European styles. And I moved up here in 2007, so on the cusp of when Heady Topper was coming out.
Right.
So I'll try anything. And I was really big into the IPAs, but I think Darren really opened up my eyes, and hoping that we can open up everyone's eyes to sort of the other styles and to make them more pronounced and how they're better to drink with food.
Right.
How many double IPAs do you want to drink and have a chicken sandwich or whatever you want to have. But and so I've been sort of letting him lead the way with the styles, and we came out with these 4 flagships, one of which is an IPA. But we have a nice oat stout, and we have a great lager, assuming we have time to make it, because lagers, they take a long time to make, but they're excellent. 5%, nice and easy, and And then we do a very European style pale ale, which is, not super hoppy, and it's a little darker bodied. And some of those beers really take to people, which is great.
Is there a lot of experimenting in the back room and looking for that next thing or trying things out for down the road?
I would have thought so, but I feel like every time we go in for an experimental thing, it's pretty planned out.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be making, even with the small system, we were making almost 2 barrels, and that's a lot of beer that if it's not good, you're not
going to. Yeah.
And I don't like to throw things out.
Right.
So, but yeah, so the styles have sort of come along, and I think we've created more than I ever thought we would.
Yep.
We've gone through probably 30 different styles over the years, and some take and some don't.
So do you kind of, when you were starting out, obviously letting the other brewer take the lead on things, did you kind of look at the market though, and to your point, God, everyone's doing an IPA, we don't want to be the IPA shop. We want to go down this road.
Yeah. There's an interesting juxtaposition there, right? So Darren and I believe that the market is oversaturated with IPAs, and that we shouldn't have a ton of them, and we want to encourage people to try these other styles, maybe lower alcohol styles that aren't, so blitzing. But then everyone comes in, they're like, "Do you have a double IPA?" And you're like, so now am I losing sales because we're not doing it?
Right.
So we ended up making a double, and we've made 2 since, and it's great, but there's a lot of people that like the lighter stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we didn't, with the intense IPA market in Vermont, we decided that we didn't want to be,
it makes sense.
IPA after IPA after IPA.
Yeah. You can only make so many, because that's the thing I always get. It's like some brewers come out and there's like 20 different IPAs. You're like, what's really the difference here?
Well, it could be just a hop variety or how it fermented a little bit differently, or and sometimes they just call it by a different name, even though it's the same recipe, just tasted different. So we're trying to be more steadfast in our creation and have a purpose and a goal with each beer.
Any thought of doing something that's not beer related, like maybe a cider or something?
So I think we might be the only brewery in Vermont that has a Vigneus manufacturing permit. And so Darren, I love cider, and with Allen Home right there, we've played around with it. Well, I've played around with it at home a couple times, and then I think we're buying about 500 gallons a year, and so we have either cider in bottles or cans, and then we have it on tap. And Darren's always said, "Oh, I don't make very good cider," but his cider is very good.
Yeah.
And we've made Ray grew us some peaches and pears. I think we mixed with some of them, so we have a medley cider in a bottle that's been aged, and it's great because it's another thing for people with gluten issues to have, and it's just a different beast. It's.
That whole world is fascinating because the world of apples before Prohibition, it was like all ciderine apples. That was like the primary thing, and there was all these different varieties, all these varieties that don't exist in Vermont anymore that were primarily growing, like the Davenets and some of these ones that were made for cider.
Sounds like you got another career coming.
Yeah, and that's been the big kick for as these big cideries have opened up is like, how can we get more of these older varieties that add different flavors to cider than say just the sweet apples. So that's cool.
Well, and I would love to get the local orchards to be able to grow some of those. Of course, you have to wait 5 years or whatever it takes to.
And sometimes they have some different varieties that are sitting out there too that you can tap into that aren't like the most desirable ones that people go out and buy all the time. You know, so but yeah.
And I love the you talked about family, talked about your kids, and it's funny. I don't know if funny is the right term, but it's great now that breweries are family friendly. And it's because our kids are now in their early 20s, but it's just interesting. I always tell my mom would joke, be like, "Man, it would be great if when you were a kid, if we had." But you can take your kids there. You can play board games. You can play cards. You can, some are dog friendly. You can bring the dog in, and so it's nice that is becoming, to your point, that community hub where it's like you don't have to worry about where do we take the kids. This is where we can take.
And I think that was, now that I'm thinking about it, with all the different venues we have in our community, there wasn't anything that is even big enough to host, like running around children. And so, some days it is a little bit crazy. And one of our stormwater retention ponds has become like a tadpole and frog pond for the kids, which is nature, which is fine. I think that's great. And I think we're going to try to get some more outdoor games for the summer this year to utilize that space out there.
Yeah.
Are you doing any work with, either local farms? You talked about the bagels and using them for different things.
Yep.
Are you working with some of the, the local area as far as spent grains and stuff?
We have, our spent grain goes to a guy that's raising cattle and pigs on 314, and then thankfully we have an agreement with a farmer in, I guess it's South Hero there, but to dump our liquid brewery waste, which we collect in a separate tank, and that used to be an indirect discharge permit, but now something happened with the state, so now you just kind of go right through the Department of Ag. But without that permit, it would be very cost prohibitive for us to get rid of that liquid waste. So, and then that gets into their manure pit, mixes with all the manure, and then they spread it on all the fields.
Got it.
Right. And so, including like Sunset Lake CBD's fields. And so we're trying to work with them on a little partnership about how we could work with CBD and stuff that's been grown by our waste, like kind of this full circle thing.
CBD infused beer, maybe?
Yeah. And then we tried to get Steve Robinson to grow some grain. He's tried a couple seasons because I think we might be the only brewery in Vermont with this mash filter, which is, it's been around for 100 years, but used primarily in larger breweries. Yeah. And so instead of lautering, you basically just push this mass through a giant filter press, and it takes away a lot of the excess water use and some time, and you can use less grain to get a higher sugar.
Sure.
Yeah, and hold on, just lost my thought there for a second. And so it allows us to use grain that might not be malted. And we made this wit beer just recently that's got 67% wheat, which in a normal brewing system you would just gum it up and you wouldn't be able to pass your water through there. So this system is allowing us to potentially use local unmalted grain. So it'd be great if we could work with some of the local farmers to do that. However, growing grain is not an easy feat in Vermont.
No. Processing it's a little tricky too because it's like highly explosive and
so
there's a whole thing.
There's a farm in North Hero that grew some grain, and we had it all malted in Valley Malt, which is in Connecticut or Massachusetts, and then brought back up. So the process isn't necessarily efficient yet. And then of course in Starksboro they have Champlain Valley hops, which has just been phenomenal, and we've done some beers with just local hops and local grain, and we've done most of our beers include the local hops, which is pretty cool. But and that's kind of that's a market that's starting to grow, and there's been hops conferences over the last decade or so that are trying to encourage farmers to figure that out so we can kind of compete with the West Coast.
That was going to be my next question. Is there still a lot of room for growth for Vermont growing hops and grain? And
I think so. I think especially as dairy farms are consolidated and they want value-added procedures on their farms that those could be those things. I don't think growing hops, I don't really grow much of anything, so I'm not very good at it, but I think that there's some possibility there for both of those things if we can get the right tools and the right infrastructure for it.
Yeah. Vermont used to be a huge producer of hops, and then there was a disease that kind of went through and wiped a lot of them out. So it's possible.
Definitely. It's just getting the right varieties that will be able to live out here.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so obviously you're a little bit of a serial entrepreneur. When you think back of starting Wally's and all that, what advice would you give yourself going back in time? What would be like one thing you'd do different, for starting that business?
Do it later in life. No, don't do that. My wife often asks me why we didn't travel before we had kids. Yeah. And I'm like, because we had that other baby. Yeah. I would say this, I've said this from day one, is write a business plan. Yeah. And it's going to be wrong. Right. They always are. Yeah. But I didn't write one for Wally's. Yeah. And Darren and I spent a lot of time writing one for the brewery because we were trying to apply for a working lands grant, which we were going to get some local farmers to grow grain. Sure. Which just gives you a starting point, and then you can look back and be like, oh, I was silly, we should have done this, and you have all that information right there, and you can show it to people, and people will be like, hey, why are you going to do this? Because if you just have it all in your head, you can convince yourself it's all correct, but if no one can see it, it's hard for it to be sort of foolproof.
Yeah, that's interesting because the guest that we just had before you it runs a marketing company.
Yeah.
He was talking about closing the loop, the feedback loop. He's like, a lot of times people, they'll run these campaigns, they'll do these things, and then they'll say, well, that didn't work, but they never actually went back and analyzed what about it did or didn't. And so it's the same concept. Now you've got this plan that you're like, oh well, yeah, well that didn't work, but that did. We got to twist and do it this way.
Kind of reminds me, I need to look back at it again.
Yeah. I think we all do as business owners because you get in the day to day and you're just in the constant battle and the fight of this and that. Sometimes it is hard to get out of your seat and look at the high level for a little bit.
But if you don't write it down, you don't know where you're going,
exactly.
right? You're just kind of like, it's that roadmap.
And I'd love to look at those numbers again and be like,
yeah,
I thought we'd be a lot nicer.
Yeah, that wasn't your fault. That came out of nowhere. Yeah. No, you could have seen that. Yeah. Nowhere in the business plan did it say giant pandemic and.
Well, that was frustrating itself. I mean, just trying to get a bank to jump on board.
Yeah.
Right after 2019, when we were working on that working lands grant, we were trying to date the banks, and then they're like pandemic hit, and they're like, we're not touching restaurants, we're not touching startups. You're like,
right. Okay, great.
Yeah. And then, which is the most crazy thing, is the SBA said the same thing.
Yeah.
And we were just like, what?
Yeah.
Where if we can't get support from that,
right?
Where are we going to get support?
Right.
And sadly, we weren't able to work with the local bank, which would have made our lives so easy.
Right.
But we did have a bank jump on board, which was
that's good.
Got us off the starting line.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the future, but crystal ball for you, 10 years down the road, where do you see the brewery? Where do you see yourself?
Who are we showing this to?
On to another adventure.
Precisely 350 followers on Instagram.
we interviewed with Edible VT, the magazine, a few weeks ago, and they were talking to Darren and Danielle. Danielle is our taproom manager, is also Darren's wife, and me about our roles. And when you build out your business plan, you have these people to do all these positions, and then you're just putting your name in all of them.
Yeah.
And so right now, my name is in a lot of roles.
Yeah.
And I'd like to just be the guy that does the books, which is I'm doing now.
Yeah.
The guy that does the payroll, which I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And then kind of fix it things, but maybe limit it to that stuff.
Yeah. That's good.
Right now
that's always the goal.
Scheduling, filling in a ton of shifts in the kitchen.
Right.
We're still building out stuff. We don't even have all our taps running yet, so we're constantly working and having expenditures there. So I think my 10-year plan is to just be free of being on call all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's been the last 15 years of my life in the bagel shop.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason that we sold the shop, is because it was just too much hands-on time. And it was hard to work on the business when we were always in it.
Yeah, and I remember seeing an interview with, it was probably WCX or one of them that you and Kristen did, and you had talked about that, and getting a little more margin hopefully in your life. And so what has been a pleasure to see is that you on the mountain with your kids a lot, getting out. I
took a lot of advantage of that.
Yeah, setting out and doing a lot of those things that you couldn't do before, and now you're able to do it. So props to you for that.
Well, I mean, like we talked about, the kids are going to be that little for only so long. And I don't want to be absent for that time.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm self-employed and I'm in full control.
Right.
Where's Dad? Oh, he's working at the bar.
Well, there's worse places.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you can dispel the myth then that if you find something you love and you never work a day in your life, you're working a lot.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, it's like I said, it boils down to seeing people happy, and I think that's for anybody that goes into hospitality. You have to be sick with that. The love of making people smile. In whatever capacity it is, whether it's kitchen or beer or whatever it is, you are at the service of these people. And some of these people sometimes make you feel like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But you don't take it personally, and you just you move on, and you realize that you're doing something for the greater good. And if I get to my deathbed and I didn't try to do something that I thought about doing, then I'd really kick myself. I'd be like, that was dumb. I should have, I should have given that a shot. Yeah. And I had opportunity, which is, a lot of people don't have opportunity.
Right.
I was approached by one of our investors really early on, and he's like, well, I don't know much about beer and I don't know much about food, but I'm in it for blah. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
If I say no, I'm going to look like an idiot.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think we're on the right path, and it's going to be work. But what else are you going to do in life?
Right.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
I was told you I was going to whine on this show. But like I'm so tired of people like they work for some sort of final goal, right? Instead of just enjoying this journey that we're in.
Right.
And we're like trying to save time for what? So we can watch TV at night.
Right.
Or
Right.
so we can get to the end and we'll have all this money to do what? You know, like I think we're all under this false pretense that we're all going to be super rich someday, and that's the be all end all versus just enjoying this ride while we're on it.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I heard someone on a podcast recently complaining to someone about the Waze app. And it was like, the guy's like, oh yeah, I use Waze to get, and the guy was like, and he's, you know, he kind of like swore about it. It's like, F Waze. He goes, so what? You're in the car for 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
You know, listen to something, talk to yourself, think about your
Talk
day.
to the other people in the car.
Right. You know, but to your point, it's like everyone is trying, what does that, and he said this exactly, what does that extra 15 minutes get you? You're not using any time. You're not using that extra 15 minutes to do anything.
You're going to be late
productive.
for a podcast, though.
That's right.
You want to be a well-known person in town and not be late all the time.
Yeah. But to your point, I mean, you enjoy it, and there is something.
Yeah,
more.
Alan and I often say that. You know, sometimes when you're in the midst of a problem and it's like, you know, it sucks, and you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to fix it. You're working through it. It's like, yeah, but a year from now we'll look back and we'll figure out how we solved this problem. We'll think that was kind of fun when we fixed that. You know, like
it's a challenge. Enjoy the challenge. You know,
and understand that what you do, because I tell my wife this all the time. What I do affords us to do other things. So yeah, there might be nights where you're responding to emails late at night, or maybe the laptop's open on Saturday working on something. But that'll
always.
But that affords you the ability to not be there on opening day and pouring that first beer and being with your family somewhere.
Right.
So
well, I have to say, having a partnership, and I know that they can go
very true.
They can go bad real quick. It's very different than the last 15 years of my life where it's just been me. And so it's better and easier because some of that responsibility is elsewhere and not always on you.
So defined roles in partnership, and you know, everyone kind of doing their job. You know.
And as this woman who interviewed us from Edible BT, Maria, she was just like, "You guys look so happy."
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
We'll take it.
Who cares about that hole we're in?
Never mind that.
But,
anything we missed that you want to add for the brewery?
tell people that it's okay to work hard jobs.
Yep.
It's okay to get your hands dirty because if you're not getting your hands dirty for someone else, that someone else is getting their hands dirty. Like me. Washing dishes. Or digging holes. And I just hope that we can kind of reinstitute this working culture.
It's good for your mental health too to work.
Yeah, like I don't understand what else are you gonna do? And I just and I'm saying that from a place where like it's been hard to find people to do
totally
work,
get it,
and even with the compensation as high as it is now, and I say it's as high as it is because some of my employees are making, well, they're all making more than me. You know, it's interesting that people don't want to do the jobs, and that kind of scares me because if nobody wants to do the jobs,
I totally agree.
We're not going to have places like restaurants anymore.
Right.
Yeah,
100%.
We'll see where it goes.
Where can people find you at Two Heroes?
Like literally?
Yeah.
I'll either be in the kitchen.
The address. Location. Website.
Two Heroes is 252 U.S. Route 2 in South Hero. We're kind of the first big red barn building you see on the right when you're coming down the hill. So.
All right. TwoHeroesBrewery.com.
That's correct.
So give these guys a try, and I'm sure summertime's getting ready to kick off, so it should be hopefully with some nice weather. And it's a heck of a run.
Come in phases, and don't all order at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't pull in the big RV.
And we're working on parking. That's another thing. Carpool.
Carpool.
People are like, why is the lot so full? And I'm like, because 4 people just came for a beer for 2 hours with 4 cars.
When we had like our employee event, like we just pack it full and like we're all going from the same place. You know?
One little party, and all of a sudden the lot's full.
Man, Two Heroes is slam today.
It's good and bad.
But all right, Matt. Well, we appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming. I'm glad we were able to sync up and make it work.
Yeah, this was fun. Did we have fun?
I think so.
Yeah.